Concerning trends continue tonight in the tropics as we are watching two separate tropical systems. One has already been named Tropical Storm Humberto. It's gradually strengthening tonight across the Atlantic. The other will be Imelda here in the next day or so, maybe even sooner. So we're going to give you all the latest information that we have on these two systems. Imelda will be a name you hear a lot over the coming days, as this will be the system that could bring impacts and even could make a landfall over the next several days as we get into early next week. So we'll go over all model guidance from this afternoon into this evening. We'll talk about steering currents, and we'll discuss a little bit about impacts and what we know, which isn't a whole lot, but we will speak on what we know. If you guys have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it, and if anybody has anything I can pray about or pray over, please put it in the comments below. Let's get rocking and rolling tonight. Let's make sure this is going to work, and it is. So I just want to take a broad look at the Atlantic just to really show you guys how close these two storm systems are to one another. So you got Tropical Storm Humberto right here, which is a 60-mile-per-hour mid-grade tropical storm, gradually strengthening, like I mentioned earlier. And then we got Invest 94L right here, which is well on its way to becoming Imelda. So it's crazy how close these are to one another. So now that you got a broad look of kind of where these systems are, let's take a closer look. So this is Tropical Storm Humberto. Make sure we don't get them both mixed up, and I don't call this Imelda, but this is Tropical Storm Humberto. It's just your classic looking mid-grade tropical storm. It's getting hit by some westerly flow a lot. Basically, shear out the west is hitting this side of the system. So the system is definitely tilted a bit. It's definitely not a line where the mid-level convection is right on top of the actual lower level circulation. But this isn't really unusual at all with a tropical storm. We don't expect these to look anywhere close to perfection, right? So just a closer look at Tropical Storm Humberto, and let's look at what is Invest 94L. There's no defined low-level circulation with this system right this second. In fact, there's a big discussion on social media about, is the low-level circulation or the actual lower area of pressure of this system maybe on the southern edge of Hispaniola rather than the northern edge, which is what a lot of guidance is initiating this at. But basically, this is just a big area of shower and storm activity, some gusty winds across the greater Antilles, and just a very healthy tropical wave that's the beginning stages of what eventually will be Imelda here in the next day or so, maybe a little bit sooner. So now we've taken a closer look at these two storm systems. Let's go over the latest from the National Hurricane Center. And this is, like I said, info from the National Hurricane Center, just overlaid on a different site. This is Zoom Earth, awesome free site. You guys should check it out. It's free to the public. So this is Humberto, 60-mile-per-hour tropical storm. By the time we get into tomorrow afternoon, this should be a Category 1 hurricane. By the time we get into Saturday afternoon, so it's going to be a Category 2. And then by the time we get into Saturday night and a Sunday morning, this should be a Category 3 major hurricane and should remain that for basically all the way through early next week. Bermuda, you guys are not in the cone. That doesn't mean you're not going to get impacts. Remember, keep this in mind as we move forward over the next few days. The cone is not the impact cone. It's just where the center of the storm could go, guys. So it could go over here and move closer to Bermuda, and then Humberto could bring impacts to Bermuda. We got to continue to watch this. So you got that, and then you got this area right here. This is Invest 94L. Okay, the millibar around 10-11, so not very strong, but has a 90% chance to develop between now and the next 7 days, which it definitely, if it's going to develop, it's going to do it before the next 7 days, and has an 80% chance to develop between now and the next 48 hours. When we say develop, we mean into a depression or named storm, which in this case will be Imelda. So if it's going to happen, it's going to happen in this area probably between now and the next day or so. So let's move forward. Let's talk about what everybody probably wants to hear about, and that is model guidance. So this is Humberto, that 985 marker right here. And this sloppy area of green and yellow and orange, this is what could still be 94L at this point, or a depression. But most likely, I think as we get into Saturday, we will probably have a tropical storm Imelda out of this. So as we continue to move forward and we get into, say, Sunday morning, and if I do forget to mention the day of the week or anything like that, look up here, SUN, obviously stands for Sunday, SEP 28, September 28. So at this point, we got a strengthening Humberto right here. It's a category 2-ish, getting close to a 3 hurricane. And then we got this millibar, says 1,005, beginning to drop. The lower you see that number get, the stronger the low pressure. And then we start to get into Monday morning. At this point, we're going to drop off and leave Humberto behind and not talk about it much, because I'm not really super worried about this storm system as far as impacts. Now, as far as this influencing the steering currents of future Imelda, absolutely. They could actually influence each other's steering currents. But we'll stop it here. Monday morning, major hurricane, actually closer to the Greater Antilles than Bermuda, as we're getting into, like I said, the 29th, the morning of that. And then this is Imelda. So we'll get closer here, 998 millibar low as we're getting into Monday morning. That's around a tropical storm. And then eventually as we're getting into, say, Monday afternoon, 991, I mean, that might be a very strong tropical storm, low in category 1 hurricane, and it has it making landfall. Let's just call it along the Carolina coastline Monday night into Tuesday morning. Not like into October. I'm talking about early next week, folks. And it makes landfall. Now, it does make that low pressure disappear. So we'll have to look at this. And here it comes. Makes landfall is around a 984 millibar low, kind of between Wilmington and Myrtle Beach. That would make it a category 1-ish hurricane or so. Now, let's see if we do have the 18Z run in, and we don't. So we don't have that quite yet. That probably is about to start running here shortly. But the Euro has a landfalling hurricane early next week, basically along the Carolina coastline. What about the latest GFS? Same thing, we'll start off south. We got Humberto right here, 981 millibar hurricane. We'll initialize this as Saturday morning. So we continue. These are kind of moving in tandem, right? We're getting into Sunday evening. We're getting into Monday morning. At this point, we got probably a tropical storm right here out of Imelda, and probably a major hurricane, I would say, between Hispaniola and Bermuda, right smack in the middle. What some people call the Bermuda Triangle, right? So let's go on and take a closer look. Here it comes on the latest GFS, the one that just ran. We continue to move forward here, and it has basically a landfalling tropical storm sometime this coming Monday night, we can say now. Pretty much hitting the same exact area as the Euro has, but a little bit weaker. In fact, we can go to this, and makes landfalls around a 990 millibar low late Monday evening, kind of around Myrtle Beach or the Grand Strand. Now we can kind of go back this, and this is the concern. You see how much moisture this throws across the Carolinas? We don't want to see that. We don't want to see a tropical storm plowing right up against, as we're getting into Tuesday, into the southern Appalachian Mountains. And you know that the Euro shows something like this also, except it's a little bit north and kind of slows down. And I mean, look at Humberto right here. Very strong, major hurricane, well off the coastline, but still pretty close. So, I mean, another landfalling scenario. What about the Euro AI model? Now, we might have the 18Z run. Let's see if we do. We do not. We started off Saturday morning, and there's Humberto right here, hurricane. We get into Monday morning, and you know what's wild is the Euro AI model don't like the idea of Humberto getting as strong, but I tend to disagree with that. But we go on and flip it a little bit closer. Here's Imelda, future Imelda coming up, tropical storm. It actually gets into a hurricane kind of off the coast of the Georgia coastline or the southeast coastline. Tuesday morning, it's much slower. If it's slower, it could introduce a different steering current. I'll talk more on that as we move forward. But as we're starting to get into Tuesday evening, it's actually a pretty strong hurricane. Category 2 hurricane off the coast of the southeast. But watch how it slows down and then it gets yanked eastward by the pull from Humberto. Okay, and then it kind of gets yanked, and then it detaches itself and then kind of spins around here and tries to come back west, like not this weekend, but next weekend, and actually gets close enough to bring impacts along the Outer Banks, and then it heads on out. So if that was the scenario, it would hang out with us for 10 days. So, yeah, so I'll leave it to that with the global models, and let's go over the latest hurricane models. Okay, same thing. We'll start off Saturday morning because I do want to show some attention to my folks in the Bahamas and the Turks Caicos Islands. So all these little kind of squiggly lines, these are the Bahamas. Okay, so you got a tropical storm rolling through your area, potentially a strengthening tropical storm, maybe even a hurricane. And as we're getting to Sunday morning, the H-Wharf hurricane model says we do have a hurricane, a 986 millibar hurricane, rolling through the Bahamas. And then the H-Wharf model wants to take this into a Category 2, almost 3 hurricane by Monday morning. Okay? And then as we continue to move into Tuesday morning, it does have a high-end Category 2, low-end Category 3 hurricane about to make landfall potentially along the North Carolina coastline. It's a much later scenario. I mean, we're all the way out into Tuesday PM of next week, and this is still not made landfall, but it's bringing some big impacts. That's a huge hurricane off the Carolina coastline. What about the HMON model? Same thing Saturday morning, just a sloppy-looking tropical storm, but then you see that millibar begin to drop, indicating a strengthening tropical system right over areas of the Bahamas. It gets north of the Bahamas, begins to strengthen, kind of get a boost off that Gulf Stream off the coast of the southeast. And as we get into Sunday, we get into Monday morning, and it kind of follows in a way the Euro GFS, but it's much quicker. This has a land-falling hurricane kind of around Georgetown and south of Myrtle Beach, Surfside, things like that, around Monday morning as a 985 Category 1-ish hurricane or so, and then proceeds to bring impacts all the way to the mountains of North Carolina. I'm not trying to spook anybody in the mountains of North Carolina, but man, this has got to be worrisome. I mean, I know I would be after what you guys went through literally almost a year ago. I think it'll be a year ago tomorrow. So, yeah. Now, what about the HFA model? We continue to move forward, just a sloppy tropical system going over right through the Bahamas, all those little squiggly areas, the Bahama Islands, okay? And then it gets away from the Bahamas and begins to strengthen, 989 millibar low Monday morning, and then it begins to strengthen into a 982 millibar hurricane as we're getting to Monday night, and it actually moves west. It's a wild, I don't believe this scenario, but it actually brings a 982 millibar hurricane, Category 1 or so, kind of Tuesday morning right into Jacksonville. It's a weird scenario. HFB model, kind of in the middle ground of everything, brings kind of a weak, sloppy tropical system right to the Bahamas, and then begins to strengthen kind of in the northern Bahama Islands. And then we got a 982, we got a 970, and then we got a 979 millibar hurricane Monday evening going right into Charleston, okay? And then brings impacts all the way through South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia. So yeah, guys, we got a lot to figure out, but almost every model run I just showed you shows almost a landfalling scenario, or at least it's close enough to bring impacts. Now, if we look at the latest Euro ensemble, remember this makes up 51 members. You're going to see this area, which is Humberto, and this, which is Imelda. So you're going to see, I'm going to stop it right here. This is getting into Monday evening. A couple things you're going to notice here is, let's just ignore Humberto. I hate to ignore it, but our main focus is obviously what could bring the most impact. So what you'll notice is a lot of these members right here are escaping north faster. So it kind of jolts north, and we'll talk about why that happens. And you got some members kind of in the middle right here going much slower. And you got some members even trying to sneak into the Gulf down here. So that's why on the hurricane models, there's such a wide variety of timing, right? You got some hadn't even made landfall by Tuesday PM, some making a landfall Monday morning. It is a big spread as far as timing, and obviously because timing is probably location, right? So you got a big spread with this, and you continue to move this forward. And I mean, some of these eventually kind of get yanked eastward by the pull, like literally the yank from, I know I keep using that word, I like saying that word, from Humberto. So you see some of these little lines right into here kind of pull that way. And then you look at the Google DeepMind model. Let's make sure we don't have a new model cycle into here. And I think this might have been it's the one from yesterday. So let's go back to this. And let's just go on out to about 144. And look at this. Look how all these are kind of racing up through the Bahamas, and then they hit confusion, like an area of confusion. Some kind of go towards the southeast coastline. Some of them kind of just hang out off the coast of the southeast, and some of them kind of get pulled by Hurricane Humberto as it races off to the northeast. So definitely confusing look here. So I do want to explain this a little bit and why, and some people might not care about this because they're not worried about Humberto, and I wouldn't blame you one bit, but some people might be just interested, and And some people might be living in Bermuda and want to pay attention to this. But, in the shorter term, I really think Humberto might struggle to strengthen, and that's because it's getting hit by some shear from this upper level low out in the Atlantic. And let's draw on this a little bit. So, it's kind of coming down and hitting this system right here. This will kind of prevent this from rapidly intensifying or anything like that. But as we continue to move forward here in time, that shear will lessen as this kind of slips underneath that upper level low. And then we have this broad kind of anti-cyclonic flow almost, just broad outflow. So all of a sudden you got flow kind of doing like this, like that, like this. Just a lot of flow being dispersed aloft. And this kind of just creates its own environment. So therefore, if air is being dispersed aloft on top of the storm, this allows for more air to rise, then that gets pushed away. And rising air allows for shower and storm action. Shower and storm action, convection, creates a moist environment. And if you cocoon the actual low-level circulation with a lot of moist air, then this allows for a strengthening state with these storm systems. Okay, so this is going to take off eventually. And it's got the 80-something degree Fahrenheit sea surface temperatures out here in the Southwest Atlantic. And then you got this storm system right here, which is Imelda. So we got some flow working up against this storm system right here, and I think this could bring some dry air to the bottom edge of the system. But on this side of the storm system right here, a lot of air is being rapidly dispersed north. So that kind of creates a favorable environment for the storm system. And this is because of this ridge over here kind of allows for air to be dispersed out away from the system. So it allows for kind of the same situation that Humberto goes through for a lot of moist, basically a lot of shower and storm activity to really get going here. So, I do think this system, I don't see this system rapidly intensifying, but I do think there's a couple things working for it. Another thing being is this right here, sea surface temperature. So, we're going to have future Imelda probably like right here. So, and it could kind of drift across this area right here, which is the Gulf Stream. Sea surface temperatures, mid-80s. So it could get a boost off that. You got disbursement of air on the entire northern half of the storm. Favorable, what I'm saying with the disbursement of air is basically a favorable upper wind pattern for development. The bottom edge could get some dry air into it with some shear that works up against the system with flow, westerly flow to the west of the system, but we'll watch. So, as far as steering currents, things could get wacky here. And I'm going to show you a different way of looking at this compared to what I've showed you as of late. Okay, let's see what this looks like on our screen. Yeah, we'll stick with that. So you see this area right here, that is center of high pressure. Okay, you see these little wind barbs right here? Like, let's make this a little bit smaller. You kind of like, for example, you see this wind barb right here and you can see the flag portion of it. That means the flow is working in from that way. So let's make this a little bit bigger once again. This is good. Okay, so flow is working around this high pressure just like this. And that is what's steering, this is Humberto, this is Imelda, that is what's steering these systems like this. Okay? At the same time, you got this feature right here, which is basically a cutoff flow. So flow is kind of going around this like that. Okay? So a couple things. One, the steering currents with Humberto is pretty simple. It's just going to go around the ridge like this, or maybe like this, depending on how the strength of the system is. A stronger system is going to want to try to fight to gain latitude more. So if this gets stronger in the shorter term, it honestly might be a little bit further out to sea and might threaten Bermuda a little bit more. So the path is a little bit simpler with this. Not with future Imelda. Okay? So if this system, and Levi explained this wonderfully. He's the best to do it on his video on tropical tidbits. I've learned so much from him. If this system gets stronger in the shorter term, then the low pressure, the actual storm system itself, and this is for Saturday afternoon, could end up being a little bit further north. If that is the case, then it's going to feel the steering currents around this high pressure more. So therefore, it's going to yank this north around the western side of this high pressure faster. It's going to feel those steering currents, so it's going to pick it up, basically, Imelda, and kind of sling it this way. And also, if that happens, then it's going to also get a kind of a tandem boost, kind of two flows working in tandem off this cutoff low moving up through here. So this cutoff low, whether it weakens or not, is going to be here too. So it's going to be two flows working together to kind of slingshot this up through here. But really what picks this up is the flow right into here. Okay? So you see where these flags are on the wind barbs, that is which way the flow is coming out of. Hope that makes sense. So if we get this in motion, you're going to see all this kind of pivot around that high pressure. So we'll stop it right here. It's a great example of this. And this is the Euro as we're getting into this coming Sunday night and Monday morning. There's Imelda and there's Humberto, just kind of riding around that ridge of high pressure, right? And at this point, we could have a weakened cutoff low, but there could still be some flow kind of working around what's left over it. So, I mean, if you just look at these wind barbs, it's pretty simple. It's kind of carrying this right into this direction. And that's why you have so many landfalling scenarios now. So what happens if, say, let's back this up a little bit. What happens if, say, this stays weaker in the shorter term? Well, if that happens, then it's not going to feel much of this flow up here, and it's not going to feel much of this flow up here. So say if 94L doesn't really develop into Imelda fast at all, and it's kind of meanders over here and ends up over here, well, then something even more funkier can happen, right? So that's just something to watch. You know, there is the possibility that this strengthens really dramatically right in here. And honestly, I would say if that happens, then maybe it can slip up through here faster. Maybe. But man, we're running out of time to trend in the better direction, I would say. So I hope that makes sense. I know it's kind of confusing. I don't expect if you're first time or second time or 10th time viewer to understand that. But, you know, to me, I always want to try to explain what you guys, the audience, can understand, certainly. But next thing we'll talk about, and this is kind of talking about some of the same thing, but impact. So the brown areas is dry air. The green areas is moist air, rain, storm activity. So here comes Imelda up on your screen. One thing you're going to notice here is a lot of dry air because of the flow working up against this system to the west. So a lot of dry air is going to try to get kind of sucked up into the cyclonic flow of this storm system. This is Imelda right here. But on this side of the storm system, there's a lot of moist air. Okay? And this moist air is surging way out ahead of this storm system. This could already be bringing a lot of rain to areas of the Carolinas up into the mid-Atlantic and the Tidewater well before the actual tropical system actually comes. And I know that's like shades of Helene, right? When Helene was coming up through here and you already had a ton of rain happening like right into here. I'm not trying to relate the two, but it is kind of eerily similar in a way. But a lot of rain getting well out ahead of this system. And, you know, this continues all the way into the system, eventually makes landfall. Why is that? Well, it kind of goes back to the upper wind pattern, right? And we're looking at flow in the upper levels of the atmosphere, about 35, 40,000 feet up in the air. And once again, you can see why a lot of dry air gets into the system. You can see this flow kind of working down here, and then it kind of dramatically goes like this. But, you know, this will probably try to throw some dry air into the system. But north of the L, which is Imelda, right here, you're getting a lot of disbursement of air, push of air on the north side of the system. So this is creating an environment that supports a lot of rising air, basically in this entire area right here north of the system. And that's why you have what could be a big shield of moisture out ahead of the storm system into this area, even though the tropical system is right here. So that is kind of the precursor event that we talk about, the pre-event, that sometimes can just set the stage to the big event in all the wrong ways possible. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but what I can tell you is the Weather Prediction Center is already honking the horn of this. And this is the last graphic we'll show you, and we'll wrap this video up. But they're already going for several inches of rain between now and next Thursday. I mean, already calling for 4, 5, 6 inches of rain in areas of eastern North Carolina and South Carolina up into southern areas of Virginia. And I expect this to increase. But this has already increased from this morning when I made a video. So, folks, that's all I got. Let's Let's go back and see if there's a new update from the National Hurricane Center. There's not. So who knows? Maybe right when I drop this video, this could become PTC, potential tropical cyclone, or they could, I doubt it, but they could make it Imelda, but I just don't see a defined low-level circulation with this system right now. But that's all I got. Thank y'all for tuning in. God bless all y'all, and we'll do it again tomorrow morning. Talk soon.